Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, December 26th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live to tape steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tuesday.
Newsday. Hey.
Except for, but not really.
No.
Not really. Well, you didn't have to cut off the music. You could have let it run a little bit as like, give us a little bit
all
of a
right, next
transition.
time.
That's okay.
So what does live to tape mean?
Live to tape means that we're doing this live, but we're taping it. So,
how would you tape anything in a fashion that was not live?
Well, like films, for instance, are not live to tape.
Okay.
Or live to film. It's really more you're performing it, but we're doing this in the moment. We're not going to be.
I'm not going to be editing. Well,
we're not going to be constructing. We're not constructing this. This is what's actually happening is live, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
However, this is our most famous week of best ofs because, as you know, Emma, it is the end of the year. And yesterday, for those of you who are not aware, was in fact Christmas. And we were not on the air yesterday because we're not going to be on the air the whole week. And who's listening to a podcast on Christmas? Actually, in any other time, I would be.
Maybe you, yeah.
I generally do not celebrate Christmas, but yesterday I had a wonderful Christmas. I'm anticipating this, like literally weeks out. I went to my friend's, a close friend, if you will, someone that I am seeing romantically. To her family.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Thank you. To her Christmas celebration at her family's house, and it was weird.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'm guessing. I
right.
mean, because I'm not, I'm not.
Weirder than how you went from close friend to very close friend to romantic entanglement.
This relationship has been moving very fast. It's been moving very, very fast, and just even in the course of that time, things went so well there that no, I have no idea. I made it through, and we're still.
You're gonna have to put your weapons of war on for Christmas away. I think for just at least this year.
Exactly. I was, and but I think we, roasted chestnuts by the fire and did all the.
That's what we do.
Christmas stuff that we did.
And you accepted Christ as your savior.
I certainly spent a little time thinking about it.
Yeah.
I spent a little time thinking about it. I don't know who knows? In a week, folks, when we're back live, then we'll find out. In the meantime, we should tell you that we've got a great show for you today. This has all been voted on by you. And by voted on, I mean just nominated and then we chose.
Yeah.
But this... literally after we did this interview, people were like in the IMs, this is a best of 2023. Yeah. And oddly enough, it was, this interview was from February of 23. Well, that's not surprising. It's best of 2023, February 27th. And it was professor of history of science at Harvard University, Naomi Oreskes. Have I pronounced that right? Oreskes. And she wrote this book, The Big Myth, How American Business Taught Us to Loathe Government and Love the Free Market. And it was
really crazy. I mean, as I listened to I read those little House on the Prairie books, and I saw the movie when I was a little kid. I think it was a movie, right? But anyway, you just
TV
show. You can see just how she lays it out, how it was essentially libertarian propaganda, and how much of that really was imbued in our culture in the 20th century.
There's a whole like literary sort of school from like the 19 teens and 20s called the New Criticism that was like, you don't judge a book by any of the political affiliations or biography of the author, just look at what's within the book. And often like those guys were reactionary, because it's actually pretty informative to know like what orientation ideologically an author has.
The best teacher I ever had always said start with their basic assumptions and everything else follows from that. That was in the context of religious studies, but they were like, if they're writing about this, they're a psychiatrist or psychologist,
right? Or
they're a sociologist, or they're some type of like, I don't know, the theography. What is it? What am I?
Theologian?
Yeah, theologian, exactly. You will see in their writing, everything will follow from that. They have a certain perspective. That basic assumption is always really important. And then, speaking of a theologist, this interview we follow with the best of Andy Kindler,
who
from
everyone loves or should love. Andy
July
Kindler,
of 2023. And Andy in this bemoans the fact that he having a tough time getting a role on the picket line because he keeps getting beaten out by other better-looking actors on the picket line while SAG-AFTRA was striking. So stick around for those. But first, word from our sponsors. And I know for a fact I have taken with me when I travel for this holiday my liquid IV packets.
You gotta.
Because, and I've finished it up right now. I'm all out from today's show. But you do not need to be an athlete, although people do say I am very athletic. Not really. People have not said that. But to need extra hydration throughout your day. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Maybe you're traveling to go to Christmas, or maybe you're recovering from having a little too much at the festivities of Christmas. Or maybe it's just you're hanging out. Maybe you're hiking. These are all possible things I've been doing. But Liquid IV makes it easy to stay hydrated. It has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than sugar alone, all in a single stick. You can carry these sticks with you. And now, and this is super exciting, their hydration multiplier comes in 3 delicious sugar-free flavors: white peach, green grape, lemon lime. It is a proprietary zero sugar hydration solution with no artificial sweeteners. It's difficult to get the uptake that you need for hydration without sugar. They figured it out. It's impressive. I got people who hit me up for these all the time.
It's really great.
I'm not a store. I just use them.
Yeah.
I don't sell them. 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you better than water alone. Like I say, every day I do this show, I get at least a bottle of this. No artificial sweeteners, 0 sugar. Contains 8 vitamins, nutrients for everyday wellness. Again, non-GMO, free of gluten, free of dairy, free of soy. They use an amino acid allulose blend, which is, I guess, a naturally occurring sweetener. Has the same sweet taste and texture you can expect from table sugar, but it's not sugar. Grab your Liquid IV hydration multiplier sugar-free in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep. Code MajorityRep at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Also, I don't care. This time of year, any time of year for me, you've got, you're busy. That's for me. And also, you want to eat better. In a week, we're going to have New Year's resolutions, and everybody's going to be like, I want to eat better. I'll make it easy for you to both eat better and to save yourself some time and actually, frankly, some cash, depending on how you go about it now. If you have resolved to eat better and also want to resolve to sit down and have like home cooked meals, I've got it for you. HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, including their 15-minute recipes. These are my favorite ones because I don't like to spend a lot of time cooking. I don't like to spend a lot of time prepping, but I want to provide my kids, or my kid at this point, a home-cooked meal. So I want to thank HelloFresh both for supporting the show by sponsoring it, but also for making it much easier. I've had other box ingredients services in the past, but they take so long. HelloFresh has like 1-pan dishes. They have 15-minute dishes. They have 20-minute dishes. And you got like, it's something, I don't know. I don't have this written down, but there's like 40 different meals that you can choose from at the beginning of the week. And they have different types of menus as well. It really gives you a tremendous variety. And like I say, makes it so much easier. And they got the portion size right. There's no waste. Lands it every time.
That's where you can save some money.
Well, you also save money. It's significantly cheaper than ordering in. But I found it's even cheaper than going to the supermarket because you get what you need and it is
portioned.
It's portioned and it's also fresh. I mean, that's probably where they got their name from. Hello Fresh. Doesn't matter if your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less. HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients, chef-crafted recipes at a price you're going to like, delivered right to your door. Each HelloFresh box is packed with farm-fresh ingredients. Everything arrives pre-proportioned right to your doorstep for less hassle and less wasted food. Also, they have a marketplace, too, that you can get, like, the sundry items that you need. I don't know what that word means, but other items that you need. Go to HelloFresh.com/majorityfree and use the code majorityfree for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. It's a new offer, actually. They haven't done that before. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/majorityfree with code majorityfree. Check the YouTube and the podcast description for all those links. Now, this interview with Naomi Oreskes, and then it will follow up with Andy Kindler. These are best ofs 2023, and we'll see you tomorrow. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. I want to welcome to the show Naomi Oreskes. She is a professor of history of science at Harvard University, author of The Big Myth, How American Business Taught Us to Loathe Government and Love the Free Market, which she co-authored with Erik Conway. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I should say, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the introduction of the show, but you also co-authored with Erik Conway a really important book called Merchants of Doubt, which ultimately became a documentary and outlined essentially how, certainly around tobacco, but more broadly speaking, the cadre of scientists who were willing to sort of, I guess, seed doubt, as it were, about scientific things that undermined science for a long time. And this book that you've written now, I think is just, it is so important. And it has been really a theme to many respects that I've been talking about for 18 years since I've been doing this stuff. Market fundamentalists. And, actually, what is interesting is that I had written a book that was not nearly as good as yours years and years ago that was supposed to be comedic, but I remember it was Gertrude Himmelfarb, who was Bill Kristol's mom, if I'm not mistaken, who was big into science denial as a way to attack objectivity in facts and government. And so there was a connection there. Just talk about for a moment, and then we'll go into the sort of the details of the book, but that connection between the the merchants of doubt and market fundamentalism.
Thank you. So in Merchants of Doubt, one of the questions that Erik Conway and I were trying to answer is, why would intelligent people reject hard-won, well-established scientific evidence, whether it's about climate change or the harms of tobacco use? And the answer we discovered, based on extensive review of documents, including their own letters, their own publication, was market fundamentalism, that they believed strongly in a kind of cosmic conflict between communism and capitalism, and they feared that any compromise to free market capitalism, even a modest one like restricting smoking on airplanes, for example, would put us on a slippery slope to socialism, communism, and ultimately Soviet-style totalitarianism. And so they felt that it was very important for them to push back against the argument for government regulation. And one way they did that was by casting doubt on the scientific information.
That's a, so there's, it's obviously they're getting paid, but it's also, there's at least enough of an ideological tentpole that they can convince themselves they're doing right. Let's talk about the concept of market fundamentalism. What do you mean when you call something market fundamentalism?
I think there are two important components of market fundamentalism. The first is the idea of the free market. So we call this a myth because it's not supported by good scientific or historical evidence. And part of the myth is simply the notion of the free market, the idea that there could even be such a thing as markets that exist apart from the rest of society. In reality, markets are human institutions. They go back to ancient Greece and Rome and Assyria, and there have always been rules and regulations for how markets operate, just as all human institutions, whether it's universities or radio and television or marriage. We have rules and regulations about marriage, and we have rules and regulations about markets. But the market fundamentalists deny this. They construct the free market as something that exists outside of society, culture, and governance, and that has a kind of wisdom that's almost godlike, so that if we simply trust the market, have faith in the market, everything will go fine. And then the second part of it is the role of government. So these are sort of two sides of the same coin. The market fundamentalists are also anti-government. They construct a story that government intervention or government encroachment, that's a word they like to use a lot, undermines the wisdom of the marketplace, therefore is a bad thing, and therefore government regulation, even to address a crisis like the climate crisis or an obvious ill like child labor, they would argue is putting us on the wrong path. It's putting us on what they call the road to serfdom.
Let's, before we get into Hayek and Mont Pelerin and that whole crew, I've had so many debates with libertarians about that question of a free market, but what is their argument? We could talk about there being a market in ancient Greece or whatnot, but just in that sentence itself, we have to acknowledge that there is some type of structure to society that we don't talk about a free market existing in a place with no name, because there has to be a place that has been sort of like, there has to be a society before that happens. But what is their argument that it exists sort of like pre-societally?
Well, I'm not sure they exactly have an argument. I would say that, as you pointed out, market fundamentalism is tied to libertarianism, and libertarianism is based on a radically individualistic notion of human activities, behavior. And so it privileges the individual, and it really glorifies the individual to such an extreme extent that if the government proposes or if reformers propose to regulate something, let's say smoking, these folks will say, no, it's up to me to decide whether or not I smoke. It's not up to the government, and I don't want the government telling me whether or not I can smoke, because that leads to tyranny. Now, up to a point, that argument is legitimate, right? I don't want the government telling me how to live my life either, except when what I do hurts other people. And the problem is that, and Hayek von Hayek himself said this, everything we do affects the people around us. There are very few things we do that only affect ourselves. And many of the issues that have come to the fore in my work, whether in Merchants of Doubt or in this new book, The Big Myth, are about activities that people do that hurt other people, whether it's smoking cigarettes, dumping carbon pollution in the atmosphere, employing children to work in factories. These are all things that aren't just a matter of what I want to do personally. They're also things that dramatically affect everyone around me.
How American is this, uniquely so? I mean, is it, and how new would you say is like the church of market fundamentalism?
Well, in the book, we tell that story. And we argue that it's not uniquely American. In fact, the key ideas really come from Europe. They're founded in Europe, mostly in Vienna, in the Austrian School of Economics, and then, as Sam just referred to, by something called the Mont Pelerin Society, which was founded in Switzerland. So the key ideas actually come from Europe. But they take on a certain resonance here in the United States, we argue, for two reasons. One is because the radical individualism at the root of this ideology resonates with key aspects of American culture. So the United States is a more radically individualistic place than many other places in the world. And for better or worse, many Americans really do strongly feel strongly about American individualism, that that's a good thing. So market fundamentalism builds on that American commitment to individualism. And like all good propaganda, it has a kernel of truth, because as I just suggested, up to a point, individualism is a good thing, but like many good things, it can be taken too far. The second part of the story, and this is again what we document in the book, is the way in which a group of business executives cultivated these European schools of thought, brought the key thinkers to the United States, paid for them, and worked behind closed doors to get them hired at key universities in the United States, and then consciously and deliberately promoted their work in ways that they thought would resonate with American people and in American culture.
I want to get into that, because this is it's so important. I think this book is so important insofar as like it really outlines that this is a project. This has been a project. It is not. There's nothing organic per se about this. But with that said, the individualism thing also feels like just one element of what it is that Hayek was trying to sort of like promote that just stuck, because there was a tradition of this in the United States. Like, for instance, like it is so post hoc, it seems to me, in terms of justifying no government intrusion, because you can't say it's my individual choice to smoke a cigarette, because cigarettes would not exist without sort of the structure of society. Like, this is like, you can't say it is for me to do what I want with my property, because property is a legal definition that needs a society to determine that. I mean, it's nonsensical on some level to start with an individual relying on a social construct, but they sort of skip that part always. And it's interesting the way they do that. But let's go back to the really nascent stuff in this country, because there was even prior to Hayek and the Road to Serfdom, prior to Mont Pelerin, there was in this country a demonization of government in service of business interests. But let's talk about that. I guess we're going back to like National Electric Light Association.
Right, or even a little further. So the book begins in the early 20th century with debates over child labor and workmen's compensation. And what we point out, something that many Americans have forgotten or perhaps never knew, is how incredibly dangerous and brutal American capitalism was in the 20th century. So hundreds of thousands of children worked in mines, factories, and mills across this country, some as young as 2 years old. And the death rates and the injury rates for these children was astronomically high. Workplace injury, adult workplace industry was extremely high as well. About 1 in 1,000 workers were killed or injured on the job every year. That would be the equivalent in today's terms of over 1.5 million people. And so this was recognized by observers at the time as a crisis. It even had a name. It was called the accident crisis. And so reformers, which included some business leaders, wanted to try to understand what could be done to make the factory, the working place, less dangerous. And what they came to were two ideas. One is that child labor should not exist, that children should be in school, not in factories. And the other was that the United States needed a system of workmen's compensation, similar to what already existed in Germany and the United Kingdom. And a key fact in this story was that workplace injury was much lower in Germany and the United Kingdom. And people concluded it was because workmen's compensation, which was a kind of insurance program, actually created a positive incentive for factory owners to clean up their factories to make them safer, because then their insurance premiums would be lower. And so the argument was made that child labor should be greatly limited and that adult labor should be protected by a system of workmen's compensation. Both things that we take for granted today. But this is where we find...
To some extent, we should say, there was a big report today in the New York Times about the comeback of child labor, which I think is tied to, the sort of the empowerment of labor, post-COVID, but we'll put that aside for the moment.
No, I know. And I've actually pitched the New York Times a piece on exactly this point, because in fact, we are living with a kind of resurgence of some of these really noxious ideas. But the point is, or at least what we argue in the book, is that we begin to see the beginnings of this argument take place. The argument that the government should not get involved because this would be denying the freedom of businessmen to run their businesses as they see fit. And so we see the early origins of this story, which then get taken up more vigorously in the 1920s and 30s and carried forward.
And we should say this is where the Supreme Court came in the concept of the freedom of the contract, which is another way of saying free market, government should not interfere. But the idea that two parties, as long as they agree to do, if the kid goes in or the parent says my kid can go in on behalf of my kid, then we allow for that. And this is, and frankly, we have a Supreme Court that is extremely reminiscent of that very court at that time, which I think is no coincidence. And so there's this battle about, the worker safety and child labor. And then we get to, I guess, the National Electric Light Association, as this becomes, as there ends up being a more sort of like, I guess, a consolidation or a cohesion to a programmatic attempt to demonize government, as opposed to like different, industry, captains of industry wanting to just stay out of my business type of thing.
Exactly. And so we discovered this really amazing story about a big propaganda campaign in the 1920s run by an organization, a trade organization called the National Electric Light Association. So this was a trade organization representing the major electrical utilities in the country, as well as the manufacturers of equipment like Westinghouse and General Electric. The question here was really a question about the failure of capitalism. So the arguments about child labor and workmen's compensation are about the social costs of capitalism, people who get hurt during the operation of factories, and etc. But in this case, it was actually about a failure of capitalism itself, the failure of the electricity industry to supply electricity to rural customers. And so a group of reformers, led by the Pennsylvania Governor Gifford Pinchot, argued that in light of the market failure, in light of the failure of the industry to provide electricity to people who needed it and wanted it in rural areas, the government needed to step in. The response of the electricity industry was to launch a massive propaganda campaign. They were subsequently investigated by the Federal Trade Commission in the 1930s, who called this the largest peacetime propaganda campaign in the history of the United States. We're used to government propaganda and wartime propaganda, but this is corporate propaganda during peacetime. And the propaganda campaign was not designed simply to push back against proposals for rural electrification. It was designed to change how Americans thought about capitalism, markets, and government. And so it was a massive campaign, and it's a whole chapter in the book, but just to give you a few highlights, one of the things they did was to hire academics, essentially shills, to present the corporate case and to lie, to misrepresent the facts about the cost of electricity generation. So one of the points that Pinchot made was that in countries where electricity was generated through municipal utilities or through government agencies, as in Canada or parts of Europe, electricity was actually cheaper. But the industry paid academics to say that it wasn't, to write reports, and then they would issue press releases and get the media, which at that time was mostly radio, but also print media, to quote these experts. So it's a kind of merchants of doubt story, avant la lettre in the 1930s. And then the other key part, and really the really noxious part, was that then they rewrote textbooks. They took textbooks that actually talked honestly about the market failures, the corruption in the electricity industry, and hired paid academics to rewrite those textbooks, distributed the new textbooks free of charge to libraries across the country, and pressured publishers to adopt the new textbooks and get rid of the old ones.
We should say there are three areas in which we see these assaults. And maybe this was the first time that we saw that, but academia, mass culture, and politics. And these are the three-legged stool, if you will, of the corporate assault on public consciousness. It's always like there's so much convergence around like Austria around that time, like with a guy like Bernays, coming out and, this is a big propagandist. And so much of this seems, I just feel like if it wasn't for Austria, we would have a much better world this day, with all due respect to Austria. There's a lot of
I need to disassociate myself.
No, I understand. That's my own little hobby horse. But Austria didn't turn out some great things around that time. I don't know if people remember, but nevertheless, so they set the sort of the template for this like trade or industry, I guess, propaganda push. The next iteration we see on a scale like this comes in the 30s from the National Manufacturers Association. They come out with a thing called, which I thought was fascinating, a tripod of freedoms, which made me immediately think, like, did FDR get his four freedoms as a way of pushing back on this? But it's a question for you. But talk about the tripod of freedoms, and this is also the group that helped promote Reagan later a little bit, didn't it? Okay, but as an actor, I should say, or post actor. But tell us about the NAM, as it were, and their tripod of freedoms.
The National Association of Manufacturers was, in the 1930s, the largest trade organization in the United States, representing manufacturing businesses throughout the country. They were also a really important player in this story. So in the 1930s, they pick up on what NELA has done in the 20s, and they decide essentially to do it again, but to do it better and bigger. And one of the things that they realize, and we have the documents where they say this, so this is NAM officials, NAM staff discussing this problem. The problem is that the ideas that they are promoting are obviously self-serving. They obviously represent the interests of the ruling classes of what then was generally referred to as big business. And in many cases, they're factually incorrect. We know that NELA paid people to lie. So the NAM staff think about this problem. They say, what we need to do is we need to connect this argument to something that Americans love, something that all Americans cherish and care about, so that it will have more resonance with the American people, and it won't look like it's just big business supporting its own prerogatives. And the idea they land on is freedom. And I have to say, when we found this, it was pretty chilling, because we had written about how the tobacco industry had done the exact same thing in the 1980s and 90s. Here was a trade organization doing this fully 50 years earlier. And so they developed this idea that they called the tripod of freedom. And they launched a massive propaganda campaign in the late 1930s and early 40s based on promoting the idea that American society was founded on three inextricable ideas: representative democracy, so far so good, the civil and political freedoms protected in the Bill of Rights, also good, but the third one, free enterprise. And they claim that because it's a tripod, if you compromise any one of these legs, the tripod will collapse. The whole of American society will collapse. Now, of course, the particular leg that they're trying to promote is the free enterprise leg. And this is interesting in two ways. First of all, they invent the term free enterprise. The historian Larry Glickman has written a great book just on that. Previously, people referred to it as private enterprise, but they say, oh, no, we don't want people thinking this is private. We want people thinking this is free. So they call it free enterprise, and then they create this story about how it's foundation to American culture. But it's not true. Free enterprise appears nowhere in the Declaration of Independence, nowhere in the Constitution, barely discussed, if at all, by founding fathers. And in fact, if you look at the history of the 19th century, you see extensive government involvement in the economy, including protective tariffs that NAM had worked to protect in the 19th century. So the whole story is a fabrication. It's an invention. It's a myth, but it's a way of connecting this story to something that Americans care about, which is freedom.
It is also just a great insight into how you do propaganda, right? Like you associate your little thing, maybe like, it's only 1/3 of the puzzle there. The other two things are like slam dunk. It's apple pie and mom, and also, the Majority Report. Like those are the three things that people need in their life or something.
Exactly. And it's visual too, right? That you can imagine the tripod, one leg gets undermined and the whole thing falls.
And it's interesting too, because we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Jefferson Cowie, who wrote a book about freedom and its use within the context of white people's resistance to federal power in the 1800s. And so, sort of mutating that, particularly around that time, coming out of the 1920s, there's a lot of that's a very loaded term, the idea of an infringement of freedom in society at that time. And then, it just made me think of the four freedoms that FDR used to push back on corporate power, being speech, again, which is noted, worship, which is, that's civil, and one of the, the legs, and then fear and want, specifically, there's an attempt, I think, to reclaim freedom from that initiative. I don't know. That's, I guess, for another person's book. But let's talk about the deployment of the American Family Robinson. I had never heard of that. And it was a radio show. I know what the Swiss Family Robinson is, but this was another tool that they used. And what I think also your book makes clear is that down the road, when we see the kneecapping of unions, by things like Taft-Hartley, and you understand that they basically, there was no mechanism to push back on these organized corporate entities anymore, because they inhibited the ability of labor to, which was the only obvious bulwark against this, to amass the power or to deploy the power that corporations were at that time. But I'm sorry, so, that's a lot.
There's a couple of things there, but I can handle it. So I think a key part of this story is a strong anti-union activity. And so the National Association of Manufacturers and their allies are extremely anti-union. And they try to use the freedom argument against unions to say that unions are an inappropriate infringement on freedom, and that therefore the government should, in fact, intervene to stop unions. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hypocrisy in this whole story, because these folks are perfectly happy to have government when it serves their interest, but fight against government when it doesn't. But to bring back to the American Family Robinson. So as you said, a key part of the argument is that we see this program, and as you said, it is a program. It functions on multiple levels. So one piece is influencing academia and recruiting experts to give the story credibility. A second part is politics, fighting in the political realm. And the third part is mass culture. And in some ways, the mass culture part of the story is the most upsetting because it's the most obviously propagandistic. Well, the academia part is bad too. But
Yeah.
I mean, the political part, obviously these people have a right to their views and they have a right to be heard in the political arena. But they also massively propagandize the American people through popular culture. And one important part of this story is a radio program, again, mostly forgotten today, but was very popular at the time, called The American Family Robinson. This was a program that was created by the National Association of Manufacturers as part of their propaganda campaign, as part of the Tripod of Freedom campaign. And the idea was to get the message out to millions of Americans in their home, where they would listen to this radio program. The program was not identified as being a product of NAM. The listener wouldn't really know where this program had come from, but each week they would hear didactic stories about individual enterprise, the sanctity of the nuclear family, and the importance of keeping the government out of the marketplace. So it was a highly anti-New Deal, anti-FDR, deeply propagandistic radio program. You can find episodes online to listen to, and my students and I did. And this program, we know, was syndicated by over 300 radio stations around the United States. It was supplied by NAM free of charge. So you can imagine if you're a radio station in a small town, you don't have a big budget, and now this radio program, which is well produced and interesting and well written, comes to you free of charge, you say, great, I put this on the air, and you do.
And I want to get to, and break Emma's heart about Little House on the Prairie in a bit. But before we do, let's sort of like, as we go through this, this is around the time that Hayek writes Road to Serfdom, and then Mont Pelerin Society, which includes Hayek and von Mises and Milton Friedman and this whole crew that wants to deploy this ideology, essentially, which is, ultimately about really making sure that governments don't have governments work at the service of corporations. Essentially, they you mentioned hypocrisy in there, and I think from their perspective, it's just like, well, it's not hypocritical. We want government's okay as long as it services us on some level, or our corporate interests. But do you think Hayek is like creating this ideology as a way of this part of this push to create an academic basis for essentially just corporate interests? Like, I mean, like, that there are examples out there. Surely he must have known about NAM. He sure, it must have known about, through these corporate interests, and they're worried about socialism and communism coming out of World War II and defeating fascism, and they're looking for an ideological framework in which to fit these corporate interests into.
Yeah, this is a very difficult question, and it's always hard for a historian to answer the question, does someone believe something authentically, or are they doing this because they are being influenced by other people or being paid to do it? And, Erik and I are not Hayek biographers, but I think I'm going to give you a charitable interpretation of both von Hayek and von Mises. So if you were living in Europe in the 1930s, there is this really difficult political situation where on the one hand you have the rise of fascism across much of Europe, but you also have the rise of Soviet-style totalitarianism in Russia and what becomes the East Bloc, and neither of those is very attractive or appealing. So it's a bit of a challenge to think about what you think is the worst threat. And I think that, and it's tricky because, so von Hayek's mentor is Ludwig von Mises, who's considered to be one of the founders of the Austrian School of Economics, which lays the foundation for neoliberalism. Von Mises does work with the Vienna Chamber of Commerce. He's closely connected to Austrian business interests. So in that sense, he's not an independent thinker. But on the other hand, I have connections to environmental groups. It doesn't mean that I don't believe what I believe. Right. So I think that it's fair to assume that both von Mises and von Hayek do hold their views authentically. And it's not crazy. I mean, some of the arguments they make about Soviet centralized planning, it seems to me, are completely legitimate. So a key part of their argument is that if the government plans the economy, well, there's two pieces of it. First of all, it's not going to work because you can never have enough information to plan an economy effectively. Markets are really good at amassing information. You can even think of a marketplace as an information gathering place. And so therefore, centralized planning is probably going to fail because you'll never have enough information quickly enough to make the planning work. I think that's a credible argument. I think it's probably right. But then they go further and they say, but more than that, to plan the economy, the government has to control people, has to control workers. It has to say who gets to work where, how many people will work in the shoe factory, and how many people will work in the munitions factory. And from there, you're on the slippery slope to totalitarianism. Okay, that might even be right too. But then there's the third piece. And the third piece is where it gets ugly, because then they say, so therefore, in Western democracies, in places like England, for example, if you have a national health service, that's an intervention in the marketplace, and that's going to put you on the road to serfdom. And that's the key move that Hayek makes, that it strikes me as not supported by history and not really logical, because like all slippery slope arguments, it implies that people have no capacity to make judgments. Now, what we do know here, and forgive me for the detail, but it's an important point, I think, to understand how this all operated. We do know that in the 1930s, von Mises was serving as a consultant to the National Association of Manufacturers. And in the 1940s, this coterie of businessmen make the decision to bring those men to America to promote Austrian-style economics in the United States with an American spin. And so even if we grant von Mises and von Hayek 100% integrity, and I think for the sake of argument, it's probably a good idea that we do, but we see the way they get developed, used, exploited, and also dumbed down in America, because that's a key part of the story too, how this rather subtle and nuanced argument is repackaged for an American audience in a much more propagandistic way.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost irrelevant to me. I mean, I suppose from a historical standpoint, it's like, you know, were they sincere or not sincere? It doesn't, that's irrelevant to me. I mean, but I do think that they had a project too, which was like, can we rationalize this impetus into a deployable ideology that can exist and almost sort of like backfill the reason why ANAM, for instance, wants these things. And I think that's a sincere endeavor. I mean, on some level, like, you know, like I'm, you know, arguably in the same business. You know, I don't, it's just, I like my ideology better.
Well, except that you have fact checkers, and I don't
pay academics to lie. I mean,
that's a pretty big difference. That's a pretty big difference.
I also go about my business in a different way, but I mean, it's the impetus is the same. I mean, like, you know, how I've got a story, they have a story, they want to deploy it. There's also involves, you know, like unethical things, I think, and paying scientists to spread disinformation. But the impetus is the same. Like, I have this ideology, you know, and how do we make it is something that is sort of digestible. And so it almost like goes from the impetus for places like NAM and this and that, and these nascent sort of like economic ideologies that are developing. The road to serfdom and Mont Pelerin is really sort of like ways in which to re-export this idea internationally, it seems to me. And it comes back to the States, and we start to see the beginnings of like a programmatic idea of both impacting academia, politics, and popular culture. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but
yeah, this is insane to me. I mean, I grew up reading some of this, right? And I did not realize that Little House on the Prairie, which you spend a good amount of time speaking about, was a part of like a libertarian indoctrination propaganda effort. To talk about that a bit, because I think that might blow some people's minds.
Yes, and one of the things that's so ironic about this whole story is All the while, these folks who were writing about are massively criticizing the Soviet Union for propaganda. And particularly, they reserve particular vilification for what they see as the Soviet attempt to propagandize children. And yet they do the exact same thing. Maybe they recognize it because they know it when they see it. So one of the kind of shocking pieces of this story, and here I want to acknowledge two other scholars whose work we drew on a lot, Caroline Fraser and Christine Woodson. It's the story of the origins of the Little House on the Prairie series. So like millions of other girls, I read those books too growing up and believed that they were the true life story of Laura Ingalls Wilder, a young girl, teenager growing up on the American frontier. That's how they were marketed by their publisher, and that's what I think most of us thought when we read those books. But it turns out it's not true. And it's not true on a couple of different levels. First of all, Laura Ingalls Wilder didn't write those books. She made rough notes for the books based on actual incidents of her life, but they were crafted into stories by her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, who was a libertarian thinker, author, and journalist who happened to be friends with Herbert Hoover and was a close correspondent of J. Howard Pugh, the president of Sun Oil Company, and also a major leader in NAM. So there's a direct connection between the Wilders, NAM, and the other business executives that we track in the story. Rose took her mother's notes and crafted them into libertarian parables, emphasizing success through hard work, individual initiative, and no need for help from the government. Well, that was a misrepresentation on at least two levels. It turns out the Ingalls family was not actually successful. Their story of life on the frontier was actually a story of repeated failures, but Rose wiped those away and made it all good, made it all successful through hard work. And the other thing, of course, is that the federal government played a gigantic role in the frontier through the Homestead Act, through the railroads, and for better or worse, through the removal of indigenous people.
I'd say for worse.
That goes back to the white settler book that we were speaking about, as well as the American conception of freedom also being tied to freedom for whites as we expel or enslave non-white people as well.
Right, and it's also particularly hypocritical on the issue of property rights, which we just mentioned. Rose Wilder Lane was a huge advocate of property rights, as many libertarians are, and she was a very, very influential libertarian thinker. Again, someone who's been mostly forgotten, but was considered one of the three most influential libertarian thinkers in the mid-century. So in her book, The Discovery of Freedom, which is a nonfiction, a book that claims to be nonfiction, although it's filled with falsifications of history, but she makes a very strong point about the centrality of property rights. But of course, underneath all of this is the theft of property from the Native American peoples.
I had a debate with Walter Block. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a big libertarian. He was a Ron Paul advisor and then ultimately became a Trump guy. And he was a professor at, it was like a libertarian sponsored, George Mason, I think, or business professor. And I asked him about that. And his answer from a libertarian standpoint, and I'm not being facetious about this, was, well, we start counting when the white people came over from Europe. That's when we start to count property rights, because of course they can't. And it was the French concept of working the land and creating some other value there. And what the indigenous people in this country did is they didn't mar the land enough to establish it as property, I guess, in some way. But and
I could just interrupt and say Rose Wilder Lane actually uses that argument, which actually goes back to John Locke, who argued that you make property yours through working on it, which of course is a complete effacement of the work that indigenous people, in fact, did do on their lands in many different ways. But Rose Wilder Lane explicitly uses that, like you say, to kind of reset the clock so that all the stuff that happened before Europeans came, somehow that gets effaced or expunged from history.
That is the amazing thing about libertarianism. It is supposed to be like an eternal sort of ideology that exists in nature, but we decide when that starts. And it just coincidentally starts when we get onto this country, just by coincidence. We should say there was like attacks. There was a real concerted effort. I mean, of no more grapes of wrath. Like these stories can't be told because of the way that they sort of like, portray government's relationship to people and corporations' relationships to people. Tell us a little bit about Norman Vincent Peale, because this is really fascinating. I mean, I guess like I grew up with Reagan and to some extent Carter and Clinton, so I'm that's less of a surprise. We can see, they're almost coasting. Well, Reagan's not so much, but certainly Clinton's coasting on a lot of this stuff. But talk about Norman Vincent Peale, because all of this is so important to the way that we interpret information today, I think.
Yes. So one of the things that made this book hard to write is we kept finding more material, more connections, more things that were relevant to the story, which is why, in the end, we ended up with a rather big book. And we like to say it took a big book to describe the big myth. So as I mentioned before, one of the problems that these propagandists had was that their account of history was false. Their account of electricity markets was false. The stories that Rose Wilder Lane told about her mother were false. So they're constantly grappling with having to brush aside the truths of history, the truths of people's lives. But there was another problem that they encountered that was different and in some ways maybe even more profound. And it had to do with our understanding of Christianity. So in the 1920s, 30s, and into the 40s, many American Protestants felt that capitalism was not really compatible with being a true Christian. Jesus, after all, had preached a message of love for the poor. Famously, in the New Testament, it says that a rich man can go to heaven as easily as a camel can go through the eye of a needle. So there's this really strong message in Jesus's teachings that could be viewed even as socialistic. And this is a big, big problem for the captains of American industry, and they know it, and it troubles them. And so they decide that they need to do something about it. And the something they need to do is to realign American Protestants with free market economics and to persuade them that that interpretation of Christianity that I've just been describing is wrong, that actually it's fully Christian to believe in a free market economy that doesn't protect workers or children and in which individuals can amass massive amounts of wealth. And so they do this with yet another project. The project is called Spiritual Mobilization, and it's heavily funded by J. Howard Pugh, the president of Sun Oil Company, who I just mentioned was also a correspondent of Rose Wilder Lane. They fund a minister by the name of James Fifield, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, so a viewer can call in if they know. And he begins to do a number of things. They create a journal called Christian Economics. I'm not making that up. They have newsletters that they send out to ministers across the country, beginning to preach a kind of gospel of wealth, drawing on this idea that people who are wealthy are good people, and that's why God is rewarding them with so much wealth. Trying to influence the curricula in seminaries, and ultimately also supporting a number of charismatic preachers who they believe can be effective in bringing this message. One of those preachers is Norman Vincent Peale, who writes the best-selling book, The Power of Positive Thinking, which, again, not entirely wrong. I think most of us will agree positive thinking does have power, but it's focusing on this idea of individualism, that you can succeed through dint of your own attitude and you don't need the government to help you. Now, two of Peale's parishioners, Mary and Fred Trump. And in later years, Peale...
I got to tell you, like the entire time you've been talking about this, I've been holding back my just raging desire to just do a Trump impersonation, going, "It's true, it's true. Everything you're saying is true."
Thank you.
I mean, honestly, like it is. If you want to understand why Donald Trump sitting on that stage in 2016 was completely bulletproof from anything anybody said up there. And you can see this in George W. Bush was like the CEO president, but Donald Trump was really the culmination of that impetus. Like, Paul Ryan talking about sort of like how, this concept of like being, morally righteous. If you're poor, you sort of like morally, you've lost some righteousness. Donald Trump standing on that stage, there was nothing that he couldn't say that wasn't morally more righteous and correct, because he was the richest guy there. And that's
right.
it. and was not, and knew enough to deploy that in a way that we've seen like Republican candidates in the past sort of like hold back a little bit. Like I think Forbes ran at one point, the guy with the flat tax. He didn't get out in front because he was ashamed of his money a little bit. He had that old money quality, but Trump, he just realized like, this is what we've been building towards where, I'm the king because God said so.
I know. And the thing is, we didn't set out to write a book about Donald Trump. In fact, the idea for this book predates Donald Trump running for public office. So it was pretty staggering to us when we found these connections, direct connections to the Trump family, to show and to see, as you just said, the ways in which the foundations for this approach have been laid for a long time and have come to fruition in sometimes really, really frightening ways.
Very frightening ways. Well, I guess we can just briefly, as we get into Carter and Reagan and Clinton, Clinton famously said, the era of big government is over. Reagan obviously said like the most terrifying words that you can hear are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, or something to that effect. Carter also like made this big push for deregulation. By the time we get to the 70s, these guys have won on an intellectual level, haven't they?
Yeah, I think so. And that's really what the third is about, is how these ideas, which were not mainstream through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, how they were mostly rejected by most Americans. Public opinion polls show vast majority of Americans supported Social Security, Medicare, wanted the government to protect the environment. But these ideas begin to become mainstream. And so the third of the book looks at how that happens. And a key figure, of course, is Ronald Reagan. And so one of the things we do in the book is to explain better where Reagan came from, because I remember when Ronald Reagan was elected, and there was a feeling as if it seemed like he kind of came out of the blue. Like, how did this actor who had been a Democrat and a union president suddenly reappear as a politician who was anti-union, anti-government Republican? So in the book, we answer that question. And we show that Reagan's transition took place when he worked for the General Electric Corporation in the late 1950s and became a spokesperson for GE's deeply anti-government, deeply anti-union ideology.
And then he went around on tours, and he was talking about actually like even universal health care he expanded into, and then he ran for governor in California, and off to the races, as it were.
And GE gives him both a political platform. They give him a media platform because he hosts their television series, General Electric Theater. So he becomes one of the most well-known people in the United States, and he's able to use that then to segue into political life. And he also gets a set of powerful, rich backers who finance his transition into politics, first in his run for governor of California, and then later.
Can't believe someone used a platform of television to launch a political career.
Did it first.
So with all this said, and certainly like we can, what's amazing is you have 100 years of this history, more of this history of like a concerted effort to attack government. Yet 2 weeks ago, Joe Biden made the Republican Party basically pledge on national television that we're not going to touch Social Security and Medicare, which is, there are two major functions of the U.S. government. That is to make, arms sales manufacturers really wealthy, and to provide social insurance in the form of Medicare and Social Security. Just in a dollar basis, those are the two major functions of our government. And despite this concerted effort, they have not been able to touch Social Security and Medicare. They've done a job on they've made some inroads in Medicare, but it's been very subtle in terms of like privatizing parts of it. What is the solution to this in this day and age? Because the corporate America is always going to have more money to buy academia. and it feels like that dynamic has accelerated or become more pronounced as the nature of academia has changed, where there's sort of this arms race as to who can have the nicest humanities building, and we're going to need capital for that.
No, it's not the nicest humanities building.
Well, whatever it is.
Nicest economics building.
Economics building.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yes, my apologies. But that dynamic has increased. We have obviously corporate control of all of our media. Including the news, to the extent that the news has become more captured by corporate interests, I would say more so than even back then, to some extent. What is how does one propagandize against this? I mean, I have no problem using propaganda as a value neutral term. But how does one do that in this context? I know this is a little bit outside your portfolio, but you've spent a lot of time seeing how the bad guys did it. What do you see is the solution or a potential solution?
Well, I'm going to depart from you on using the word propagandize, because I am going to say we don't have to propagandize, because actually the truth is on our side. Because one of the empowering things about this story is you see how much these people lied, misrepresented, cherry-picked. And in that sense, this book has a very close family resemblance with our previous work in Merchants of Doubt. It's really a book about disinformation and how people get disinformation to take hold. And so one lesson of this story is you don't have to lie when the facts are on your side. You don't have to resort to propaganda, but you do have to have a good story. You do have to have a good narrative. And I think one of the things we see in this book is how these people worked so hard to tell a story that was compelling, and to tell it on television and radio and film and in children's book and in academia. And so I think that progressives need to rethink, what is our story and how do we get that story across? And, this is a complicated problem, and there isn't going to be I'm not going to be able to wave my magic wand and fix it. But I think one important thing does have to do with how we think of ourselves and our relationship to our government. And I'm going to emphasize our, because I think one of the things that's been lost in this propaganda, one of the ways in which they have succeeded is, the use of the term the government, or the use of the term big government, right? These were part of the propaganda stories. Big government was deliberately introduced to be a contrast with big business, and to shift the way people thought from hating big business, which most people in the 1920s did, to hating big government. So I think we have to reject that language, and we have to remember, what the founding fathers said, despite their flaws. Government is an expression of the will of the people. That's what democratic governance is all about. And so I think we need to reclaim that notion, and that means reclaiming our own identity as citizens. Back in the 1920s and 30s, lots of Americans thought of themselves as workers. Then they came to see themselves as consumers. And of course, we are those things, and we sometimes have power as workers and consumers. But our greatest power, I think, is as citizens, because we are all citizens. But a lot of us have kind of abandoned that. I was thinking the other day about my own parents. I grew up in New York City, where we used to say it was a two-party system, the regular Democrats and the Reform Democrats. And my parents were Reform Democrats, and they belonged to a political club. And it met every Saturday. And when it was time to get out the vote, my parents would be on the phone. They would get calls from people about where things were happening, and they had a really strong sense of civic engagement. I don't know anyone today who's a member of a political club, not a single person. So I don't know if that's the right model or we need some new model, but I think all of us need to be engaged, and we can't just think of as the government as something that's out there that we're not connected to. We need to reclaim those connections and think about, where is the place that we can make a difference in our own lives. And that will be different for different people, but that's at least one piece of the story, I think.
We can, I think we'll be able to send you information on the Boston DSA up there if you are interested in joining a club. I mean, and to a large extent, that is we're seeing, it's happening with, I think, there is a generational divide, I think, that and maybe it has to do with when the fall of the Soviet Union happened, or post-Occupy. But there's a there does seem to be a change, and we're seeing it reflected to some extent in the administration, right? I mean, we have gone from a consumer-oriented FTC and Department of Justice antitrust division to a more citizen model that is looking at the implications of this anti-competitiveness in terms of what it does to our politics and to what it does to sort of like broad-based opportunity for people. And we're seeing, I think, at least to some extent, in some places in this administration, a reinvigorated sense of labor, although not to the extent that I think is optimal, but certainly relative to the last Democratic administrations we've seen, there has been a change.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other important thing is we need to tell the stories of government success stories, because we've been so bombarded with this idea that, big government doesn't work, that it's wasteful, that it's corrupt, that many of us are not really, we don't have the stories of government success at our fingertips. So in the book, we have a whole section where we talk about that. And I'll just give one example. I did a book reading last week in Washington, D.C., and it was a very friendly audience, but a person in the audience who was clearly friendly, not hostile, but he said, well, how can we defend government when so many government programs are failures? And I said, well, actually, a lot of government programs are successes. I mean, think about the interstate highway system, Social Security, Medicare, the space exploration, the internet, right? These were all government programs, and they're success stories. And I think one of the reasons why the Republicans keep going after Social Security, because they went after it under Reagan, they went after it under George W. Bush, and they're going after it again, as Joe Biden correctly pointed out. Why do they keep going after Social Security when the American people love Social Security? Polls show that something like 70 to 80% of us approve of Social Security and do not want to see it privatized or reduced or cut. Well, I think the answer is they go after it because it works, because it's successful, because it refutes their core ideology about the failures of big government. Social Security, as you pointed out, it's giant government. It's a big government program, and it really works. It has achieved what it was set out to achieve. It has protected elderly Americans from poverty. And so it shows that actually big government can work. And that's why Republicans have to fight it.
Naomi Oreskes, the book is The Big Myth, How American Business Taught Us to Loathe Government and Love the Free Market, which you co-authored, as you know, with Erik Conway. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being
Thanks
with you.
so much.
Thanks.
Slide my I went with the emergency 911. Hi, everybody. Check it out. Look behind me.
Well, nobody can see it, actually, because we're back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Andy Kindler. Can we...
With a Jew like Andy Kindler.
Let's do wide frame for him, just to give him a single shot for a moment so we can see what's happening behind him.
God bless
You're looking maniacal. He's so...
Give me a wide shot. Why is Emma in my shot?
I mean, it's in my contract, Andy.
Oh, my God. I went to the wall for you, Emma.
Yeah, Andy Kindler. You made me laugh so hard.
Oh, whoa!
To write you your own theme song.
Andy Jeweler, Kindler, Jews.
All right.
Andy, I changed my name to Andy Jews.
Andy Kindler, let's just start. You were so proud of your backdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got flowers that I bought for my beautiful wife.
I just don't understand. Like, what's going on there? Every time we talk to you, it's a different backdrop.
It's like a therapist's office.
But it doesn't look like anybody lives there. It looks like a therapist's office.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I have to take a call. Is it union? I can't do it. Call me back. Sir, you sure it's not union? I can't do it. How is that? Good? Acting?
Yeah, no, you still got it.
I'm on strike, guys.
I was going to say, John Benjamin used to have a joke years and years and years ago. He's like, I want to live under a dictatorship so that I can justify my sense of oppression. And like at some level, this is perfect for you because like you could say like I'm not working because there's a strike.
And I'm exactly. Now, look.
Yeah.
Yes, the phone wasn't ringing before the strike. That's true. But that's because a lot of deals were in the works. And by the way, soon Cameo is going to go union. So watch out. I'll have no work at all when I go union with Cameo.
I like how you got that in the first
Cameo.
2 minutes.
Subtle.
We no cameos without at least $15 minimum to pay for a cameo.
But you undersell yourself on Cameo anyway.
No, I'm 45 now. I'm 45.
45
$45.
That's good.
You started out at like $7.
$7. Then I lowered to $6. I went to $5. And then I gave a free Andy Kindler DVD of I Wish I Was Bitter with the cameo.
And you would personally deliver it.
And FTD Floral 20% off your next arrangement.
Oh, that's actually a good idea. That is actually a good idea. Like if you figured out how to do like coupon codes, that's very smart.
If cannabis shops would pay me in cannabis, that's all I'm asking for. I will advertise 24/7.
There you go. All right. Well, the gauntlet's been dropped.
That's your. This is your influencer era.
That may
Andy.
happen.
I guess they close at 11 o'clock though.
So now, Andy, are you going to go to the picket lines? I'm heading out there Thursday. I get the picket lines in New York are all like 9 a.m. I think to 1 p.m. So tough for me to make it here until Thursday.
You can't do it out here. They say get in line if you want to picket. Just get in line if you want to picket. That's how tough it is with the competition. I can't picket because Brad Pitt's in front of me.
Yeah,
you go way over there.
You can't even get booked on the picket line.
Booked on the picket list. I'm on the waiting list. I'm on the waiting list to see if someone drops out of the. If I can't think of one person on TV. If the guy if John Krasinski gets sick.
That's good. Yeah.
Too many Kindler types on the line is what you're saying, right?
Well, I don't understand I was up for Jack Reacher, and he was my. Here's my
Is that
audition
Mission
tape.
Impossible?
Yeah, that's what Krasinski's in. Yeah.
Okay,
that's I know what that's the I remember.
That's the CIA op.
Here's my Jack Reacher audition. Oh my God! There's a criminal who I can't quite get. Oh, if I could only reach that criminal. Oh, with my Reacher arm. You guys don't know Jack Reacher?
I love Jack Reacher.
Oh, sorry,
I mean,
Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan is the bad one. Jack Reacher's a very good show. I think it
Is
maybe
it
would have
also
been better.
Jack Reacher too?
I don't know.
There's Jack Ryan
two?
and Jack Reacher, but
Ryan is the Tom Clancy.
you're down.
Your mic's not on.
Reacher's the good one, and I mean I do think it might have been better if Andy was the lead, but
Oh, I can't quite get this damsel off of the ledge. Please, damsel. The hell with her. Huh?
You know,
Andy, that works.
One of the first thoughts I had was, oh no, with this strike, are we going to have a problem with Andy on social media? I mean, I was like, is there going to be just too much time on Andy's hands? And then I went to your Twitter feed and I realized you were winding up for this.
It's all my fault, I think.
It really is not. I wish I could say it was your fault, Emma. Before you came along, I never got into scrapes on the internet. All of a sudden, you're there. People don't like. People think I'm a little mouthy, is what they think.
Oh yeah.
No. Here's the thing. I'm being targeted now by Glinner. Graham Linehan is his name.
Who?
Graham Linehan is his name.
Who's that?
Graham Linehan?
What was I calling him?
Lineman.
He's like a
he
British
was the
comic.
creator
He's a
of Father
wild
Steve.
transphobe.
Oh, okay.
What's that?
He's a British comedian who's
like one of the most I would say viral and obsessive transphobes.
He created Father Ted and some other of those I don't know. I try when I was really into British comedy in the 2000s. Even I couldn't quite get.
Oh, you mean the weak era of British comedy? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
well, we bonded over our mutual hate of Ricky Gervais, who might be the worst. I'm making a list of the most despicable human beings. It's different from Oberman's list.
So you bonded over your hate of Ricky Gervais, and then
it's
you
not
had
Gervais. Will you stop making him French?
Gervais.
I think it's Gervais.
It is Gervais.
Whatever.
Right, I think Gervais is better. Okay, yes, we bonded over because
over
Ricky
Gervais.
Everybody in Britain hates. Well, first of all, I'm realizing now that a lot of people in like your Richard Dawkins and all those kind of, they're actually white colonialists. They're not even from the generation past. They are still Richard Dawkins in his early years took over several countries as part of him before he started into his meme bits.
All right. So and then
this guy went after me. So this guy, all of a sudden, when I have a friend, Parker Malloy. Do you guys know Parker Malloy?
Yes.
She is the greatest.
Online. Yeah. Okay.
Parker Malloy told me that guy's crazy. She said years ago, that guy's crazy. And then I didn't know. I went to his account, and he's like, "Man, women are wearing. There are no such things. Wasn't Renee Richards?
Yeah,
was that
tennis player?
Yeah. Now I heard that this might not be true because I don't know anything for real. Renee Richards coached Martina Navratilova. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever experienced in my life. How can you, Martina Navratilova, say what you want about America? She came here. Like I allowed it.
What?
Say what you want. She escaped the Eastern Bloc thing, and she was here. And she's using the exact same arguments that were used against gay people, against trans people. There's no difference. How does she justify it? Thank you.
I mean, it's amazing to me because they are really feeding into patriarchal notions of womanhood, and they have no understanding of that's the case, where it's they want to define womanhood as the patriarchy defines it, and then they're gatekeeping other people who are women, they're just trans women, from participating, and then they think like they're preserving something finite, where it's like, it's just bizarre to me. I don't understand how you can have that conception of your of womanhood and be that exclusionary. As if like Maria Navratilova's experience as a white woman is in any way comparable to like say an indigenous woman in this country, or a black woman. No. Like everybody's womanhood is different. Trans women's journey to womanhood also different, and so like. Expand the tent, but I would say, Andy, it's not a coincidence that white women are at the forefront of this TERF movement, because they really are. They're just bigots across the board, and that's their definition of what a woman is very much centered on their own experience.
Well, I think that you said it perfectly, and if I was to add to it, I would ruin it. But I want to say that you're absolutely right, and it's like. To me, I don't know how it all worked. How did we end up in a world? I just found a lyric that the Beatles used that could be used for Joe Rogan. He's the all-American, bullet-headed Saxon mother's son. That's from Bungalow Bill. Okay, so look, Joe Rogan. If you told me that Joe Rogan, when I watched him, I go, okay, this might be the worst comic I've ever seen. Terrible, terrible. He did bits like, these two animals are having sex. All right, I didn't do it as good as he did. How did these people end up as our? I mean, I know it's disgusting. I know they were always horrible comedians, misogynist assholes, Dice Clay, all these people. But how did it get so tied up with this right-wing movement? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because a lot of it is just greed. Like
I mean, I think they're he came from fighting MMA and grew, and then eventually just sort of like wandered into that territory in the same way that people forget Mike Pence was a radio host who used to fill in for Rush Limbaugh. I mean, it's just this country does not require a tremendous amount of like expertise or bona fides or even work.
Well, how about Russell? How about Russell Brand? How about Russell Brand?
Yeah.
I mean,
I never was a big fan of Russell Brand, but there was a time period when he was entering recovery where he actually seemed to say a couple of things that might have been helping people in recovery. Now,
yeah, and Russell Brand also voiced the Mark Fisher book, Capitalist Realism, I think. And there's been times where he's been saying things like, I think like even 5 years ago, defending the NHS, and now he's basically joined in the venture capitalist attack on public health in this country with his anti-vax COVID stuff.
I think a lot of it is that it is easy for someone who is adept at being entertaining in some manner, and sort of wades into this stuff to be untethered and to basically go with the people who have access to them. And on the right, the concept of oddly of celebrity in that world is much more fed. And I mean, literally it's just much more, there's more resources. And people, I find it odd, chase celebrity. It's one thing to chase celebrity in the context of being an actor. Right. Even though I think, frankly, you and I may come from a school of a dispositional school where we sort of have a little bit of a jaundiced eye towards that. I mean, your whole comedy career was basically in critiquing the industry on some level. And I think certainly the stuff that I did that was most meaningful to me was also the same way. But if you get, how do you get really crappy actors to become huge stars? It happens all the time. Right. They chase celebrity, and that when that gets imported into this sort of political realm, it's not that hard to do, particularly with, if you're aligned with sort of the mentality of what drives, social media numbers. It's not that it's doable. With that said, I'm glad you're here because we have some comedy that is also.
Oh, I thought this was one of my new bits that I open up with.
We have some. We don't. Let's get sort of funny with some of this stuff
because it's Casual Friday, folks.
It's Casual Friday. We're being so serious with these topics.
No, we don't need it. We don't need it.
Let's go into something that's funnier.
Choo choo.
When we talk about the actually, no, we don't have any Dennis Miller.
Well, it's too old. I think Emma was the first person to go. The guy's 100 and he's from he was from vaudeville. Let him go already.
I mean, maybe I said that, but I don't remember. I don't even remember.
This is a clip that is provided to us by the show The Surfs because apparently they actually purchased a membership or something. Somehow got a hold of this clip.
Yeah.
This is a direct to members stand-up special of Jimmy Dore doing some insightful trans work here.
And does he sound like this?
Well, Andy, you'll know it's a joke because he'll look at the camera like.
Does he have the card table and the projector? Because I heard that he's upgraded his card table.
This is like he's doing a stand-up special here. He's really shooting it professionally. And you'll see this. So this is the A material, incidentally, which you bring out for the big special. This is the A set.
So it goes L, G, B, and then T. Skip the T's. Don't need that headache.
I'll pause it. To be fair, we're not going to pay for the whole thing, so we don't have access as to why anybody in that audience thought that was funny. There may have been some brilliant premise, about
I doubt that. I will bet my money on that they just were agreeing that the T should be taken out. That's what they're agreeing with.
But it's also hilarious.
It's also funny too.
It's also super hilarious.
Those wacky T's who have no place to go now.
And I'll tell you, as someone who has some experience producing stuff like this, the number of mics in the audience. There's a lot of mics in this audience. You could hear individual laughers in there, which is pretty good. Put
lavaliers on all of them.
Exactly.
So it goes L, G, B, and then T. Skip the T's. Don't need that headache. I tell you, I'm so nervous. I don't even feel comfortable talking about trans fats. You want to go?
Time out. Andy needs to say something.
Oh, sometimes things are funny. Sometimes things are funny. You have to give it up.
Need to get Andy oxygen mask.
Actually,
you said trans fats. You said trans fats.
I didn't even like. Look, I was so scared of trans people. I wouldn't even touch trans fats.
I mean,
in a restaurant, is that going to groom my son?
Yeah.
Right from restaurants.
If you thought pronouns were funny, wait till you get a hold of prefixes.
I know, but honestly, I mean, you got to be. You can be so scared of trans stuff that you would never go to Transylvania.
Yeah.
Am I right, people?
Not even with transportation.
Yes.
Hey, why don't we put those trans people in a trance and send them over to trans?
Okay, that was. But honestly, I mean that it's clever because trans and then
and we're anxious.
Crisscross.
Even fascist wordplay is funny.
Let's go. All right, so let's go back a little bit and the trans stuff. And you know how you can measure the audience is by how hard they laughed at that.
I tell you, I'm so nervous. I don't even feel comfortable talking about trans fats.
I don't need to stop.
You want to go
to stop it again too, but we got to play it again because you know what's even better is that not only is that joke, but he elongates the like he adds a syllable in the word trans fats as if to say like I'm building in the snare drum into the actual line, which is that's a pro
Yes,
technique.
but you have to also say he's unnaturally funny. He's not funny at all. He's naturally a horribly unfunny person. So that's why he engages in the stand-up comedy tricks, because he has nothing else but his warmed over Johnny Carson impression.
All right, let's go back and just listen to the way that he hits the trans to remind everybody.
Oh yeah,
that's
that
where
was
the
a little
joke
too
is.
accurate.
So it goes L, G, B, and then T. Skip the T's, don't need that headache. I tell you, I'm so nervous. I don't even feel comfortable talking about trans fats.
Yeah, you're right, trans.
If you want to go from a mono to a polyunsaturated, that is your journey, and I support it.
People are applauding that.
Look what they did to Chappelle. You cross the T's, they will dot your I.
Pause it for a second.
I'm not gonna...
What is that?
What does that mean? What does it actually mean?
I mean, people are clapping and laughing like they knew, like exactly.
No,
like,
it doesn't mean anything
got
at
your
all.
eyes
He'll
dotted.
pot. Maybe he thinks Chappelle's going to punch, or the trans people will punch.
Is it like a sniper thing, like getting shot?
Probably more punch in the eyes.
And let's not forget that Chappelle is one of the worst human beings in the world, and has gone out specifically in Netflix specials to trash trans people, bash them. He does. That's all he talks about in the last special that I saw.
Yeah, he's fixated.
So
Well, it's multiple specials, like in a row.
Yes.
He's fixated.
Well, trans people got to be taken down a notch. I mean, don't we? I mean, do we agree with that? They got to be taken down.
How many
notch.
rights? That's a new one. They go.
But
what they say? What rights specifically?
Is there something about the dot the eye that I'm not aware of, like some cultural reference?
I think it's a
gotta
violence
be.
thing. It's punching you in the eye, you get black eyes. I think that's probably the. If he had to elaborate.
Did he get punched in the eye?
No.
Did Chappelle get punched?
Wasn't there something?
Oh,
I don't think Chappelle was somebody go on the stage. I can't remember. Oh, and they said it was. There's somebody that went on the stage, right? I don't remember the story.
You guys are thinking too hard into this.
No, I'm trying to find out what's funny because otherwise it's like I went from trans to trans fat, and now I'm going like T's as in T for trans. Like the joke is just another pun.
It's about the alphabet. It's about the alphabet. That's all we've got here. Yeah.
Cross the T's, dot your I's. Yeah, I mean that he didn't. Yeah.
No, I know it's an expression, Eric. I know dot the T's.
Yeah.
But it's.
I'm going to need a transfusion soon.
Oh God. God.
to do that. I support the trans ladies. In fact, I say trans women are more women than cis women. How could you say that, Jimmy? Well, look at cis women. You could call them guys, and they don't care. Like, you can misgender them. Hey, guys, how you doing? They'll go, I'm doing good. How are you? They don't fight for their pronouns. You ever try that with a trans lady? Call them a guy. They don't put up with that shit. I found that out the hard way, boy. One night I came off stage and I was walking past these two trans ladies, and the one trans lady says, hey, that was really funny. And I stop and I go, thanks, guys. Where are you guys from? I said it twice.
This did not happen. That's fucking
And the one trans lady got so pissed off.
Nobody came up
She
to
slapped
him.
me right across the face with her dick.
They're violent.
With her dick? Did you say dick?
Yeah. Sorry, we'll go back over that.
Yeah, please go back over that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. That's a long way. That whole joke just started with how do I do the joke about slapping across the face with the dick. That was it.
He's still not doing. I'm going to tell you this right now. He's still bombing comedically, and he knows that he's bombing comedically, even though he's getting laughs. He's bombing because he's going. You may ask me why I say that, Jimmy. He's not inconfidently strutting his stuff. He's trying to. He knows. He goes. My stuff's not funny. It's just hate speech. But I got to do a show at the Hoo Hoo Lounge, and now I'm going to try and craft these stupid jokes out of it. That's what he looks like while he's delivering it.
This is the tell right here.
Yeah.
When you gotta say, like, here's my punchline. That's the tell right there. I mean, like, anybody who's ever performed, like, knows, like, when you're relying, you've got to dig into and you could see that in the beginning of that bit. But
I've seen his stand-up 20 or 30 times. I know his stand-up. I used to work with him, like in the improv. He was just always known as, they used to say, we used to think Jimmy was kind of a nice guy, but he's just a terrible comedian. That's what we used to think. He had no political point of view. He had no ideas. He had nothing. Zero. He came with nothing to the table except a desire to make a lot of money giving out misinformation about COVID.
Well, it's worked. I mean, you gotta
achieved that dream.
You gotta give it up for that. I mean,
Could you guys live if you knew people had actually seriously died because they listened to your advice? People have died because they listened to Joe Rogan. Can you imagine someone in the hospital? Maybe Jimmy Dore. I shouldn't have been so.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Rogan has said on occasion, you're an idiot if you listen to me. But then, at one point you got to take responsibility for the fact that, like, you have millions of people in your audience. Chances are there's a decent percentage of idiots.
Yeah. But that's just asking questions, right? He's not just asking questions, right?
But yeah, that was, what else did we want to go over?
Oh, there's another Jimmy thing.
Do we
want to play that more?
I wanted to get just to the very end when he does the ultimate stare at the audience.
Yeah, this is the real punchline.
They got so pissed off. She slapped me right across the face with her dick. You ever been slapped with a female penis before? Comes out of nowhere.
Get it?
See?
It comes out of nowhere. Do you get the joke? Either of you get the double entendre?
It comes out of nowhere.
Comes out of nowhere.
I mean, it's not really a double entendre. It's sort of difficult to figure that out.
He's like fixated on stuff like that. Like this is just one of his titles from a few thumbnails from a few days ago.
Why?
AOC PISSES in progressives' faces. That was a day ago.
Okay.
He's coming out. I mean, is Cornel West still gonna? Can he still get Cornel West to say something positive about him? I know you guys feel differently about this, but I am not a Cornel West fan.
Oh, I think we are, but yeah,
I'm not super enthusiastic about the campaign, but whatever.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about. Forget it. Doesn't matter. That's another. Our disagreements on the left are between wonderful people who care deeply about each other.
Yeah.
What was the other thing that we want to talk about within? What? Oh, yeah. Since we're talking about Jimmy Dore, and we might as well, we have a quota that the deep state asked us to hit in terms of Jimmy Dore videos that we play.
By the deep state, you mean MSNBC?
Deep MSNBC.
Remember the Clinton News Network?
Yeah, the deep MSNBC.
Yeah, those two.
We should just say, I'm sure, Andy, you read about this big lawsuit, this defamation lawsuit that is filed against Fox News by this supposed pro-Trump protester, Ray
who was
Epps.
the head of the FBI, who was the underdirector of the FBI under Charles Colson from 75 to 83. And this is proven. He may deny it. It may not be true. I may be lying. But that's what's happening.
This is somebody has resurfaced this. I don't know. Was this recent? I don't know if he did this recently or just.
It can't be recent because he didn't have the hair dye from the special.
But the hair dye was in March.
Oh.
So I think this. I'm pretty. I'll double check, but I think this.
Isn't this in response to the most recent
yes,
stuff?
I think
it
this
sounds
is
like
because he's been indicted.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, because Ray Epps made the lawsuit. This
is in response to the. Are you sure?
Lawsuit, yes.
He references the lawsuit. He
says, "Oh, he does."
He says, "I look forward to the discovery."
No. This is before the suit was filed. This was a while back.
Yeah.
I'm convinced this is older than that. If you don't know when exactly it is, I don't assume. I think this is like probably at least 6 to 8 months out. Because remember, at one point, Tucker Carlson was making this his entire show. And Tucker Carlson got fired the day after Ray Epps was interviewed on 60 Minutes. I think somebody dug this up from probably over the past year and a half.
That's my sense too. From
certainly,
watching
it's obviously in the wake. It had to have happened in the past year or two because obviously. And listen, what's really important is people understand the assuredness in which he speaks about something that he's totally wrong about. And I mean, I'm not an attorney, and I don't know that that Jimmy Dore has the deep pockets that somebody else does. But I would be worried if I was Jimmy Dore that I would be included in the defamation suit. But if not, I was Jimmy Dore, I would probably file an amicus brief on behalf of Fox News because obviously he doesn't think there's an issue. He seems to have inside information about this.
So this guy's an obvious Fed. January 6th was a fucking FBI psyop to make the MAGA movement illegal and to try to throw Donald Trump in jail for inciting it. Because the establishment is so corrupt, they know people are so done with voting for them that they can't beat a game show host anymore. And that's what that's about. That's what January 6th was about. That's what all these lawsuits against Donald Trump. Could you imagine if Barack Obama got out of the presidency and then Donald Trump tried to prosecute him for 4 straight years?
Pause it for 1 second. First of all, we know that Donald Trump did in fact try and prosecute. They had an investigation on Clinton
and into Obama for looking into the Russian interference, right? Or was that just essentially?
Well, the Durham investigation was the investigators, and it started out with like, this is going to the top.
Yeah.
How about the IRS that just happened to audit Comey, who I would audit myself?
Yeah,
but still.
I mean, did Obama try to overturn the democratically elected results of the 2016 election, even though Hillary Clinton, hey, she won the popular vote? They didn't make those kinds of claims. It's so dumb. I mean, this is a left-wing commentator, apparently. They're trying to criminalize the MAGA movement.
Well, how deluded are you to be watching this? I mean, that's the thing that gets me. There's a lot of people like...
Well, I'm sure this video got like 200,000 views. I mean, that's the thing.
I don't get the crossover to why would you think who's believing? I know they're believing that January 6th.
And we've been saying this for a long time, and I think Michael used to make this point. To be anti-establishment without any type of ideological grounding allows this type of drift. Because if you don't have, it's one thing to critique the powers that be. But one thing that's problematic about it is when you're not specific about what those powers are. It becomes very easy to drift. And one thing that is problematic about it is to not have any type of ideological sense, whether it's even like a named ideology. If you don't have some principles that are associated with how you would change this situation and under what points, then it's very easy to drift in this way.
It's secret anti-government libertarianism, I think.
Well, it melds into that.
Yeah.
I think because, and you saw that like within the context of like you saw that with like the hippies. There were left-wing hippies and there were libertarian hippies, and that did not become clearer until you got further out.
Yeah. And all these folks, like, we've degraded from the Bernie Sanders moment where we were actually talking about capitalism and how like both parties are basically different coalitions of capital, one preferable to the other. And now you have all these guys saying the uniparty, which to me is like, that's just an anti-government sort of like dead end.
All right, continue.
I wanted to say this though too, like about these people like J.K. I know this is a little off the topic, but like people like I really believe this about like people like J.K. Rowling and Martina Navratilova. It's like they believe they're superior. I absolutely believe that they've let their fame make them think like, oh, they're actually better people. They're actually smarter, more superior people than the masses. So it's not. So it's like anybody could have made the mistake with trans people just because they didn't understand it. You don't understand something,
right?
But they went right to their ego took over.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm right, and they are so wrong. And I don't know how they get out of this, except that that's all they'll be remembered for. All J.K. Rowling will be remembered for is this TERF movement, and I do really think it's the ego. The ego. It's like Trump. Not as bad, maybe as bad. Just the thinking that they know, and they can tell us. So that's why people like Martina, they don't even know. I don't think J.K. Rowling, they're not even capable of understanding the issue because they entered it from this weird point of view. And they're in Glinner, all those people, and all these people who were Ricky Gervais's friends are all into this J.K. Rowling thing. They went from the atheism, if you believe in God, you're horrible. They went from that to this.
Let's continue to hear Jimmy Dore's really clear theory on who Ray Epps is. That like is,
and he did the Seth Rich stuff, right? I mean, wasn't he terrible about that?
Yep.
Yes.
So this guy's an obvious Fed. January 6th was a fucking FBI psyop to make the MAGA movement illegal and to try to throw Donald Trump in jail for inciting it. Because the establishment is so corrupt, they know people are so done with voting for them that they can't beat a game show host anymore. And that's what that's about. That's what January 6th was about. That's what all these lawsuits against Donald Trump. Could you imagine if Barack Obama got out of the presidency and then Donald Trump tried to prosecute him for 4 straight years and did? Can you imagine that? Because Barack Obama's a war criminal. So they could have.
That's from Cornel West.
Barack Obama tortured Chelsea Manning.
So he gets that from Cornel West, which has always bothered me.
What is it?
Wait, so this tweet that he's referencing from is 4 days ago?
Wow, so you guys were right. Yeah. I mean, then this is pretty irresponsible.
You should have seen the booth. I saw them writing notes about you guys.
Hold on one second, too. Let's just be clear about something else. And I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't say like I'm happy about this. This tweet, is this video he did? No, that's not.
He did a video, a very similar video 7 months ago, but I think this is an updated version.
Either way, it's not like he's retracted, obviously, from that tweet. But here's the thing. This notion that they're not voting for the establishment. Now, presumably, there's 2 ways in which you could say, well, who's the establishment as he's referring to them there? It sounds like he's just saying the Democratic Party, as opposed to the actual establishment, which is members of both party and whatever it is that and I would say also like people in finance, like the establishment actually means something.
Well, he's trying to exclude Trump.
He thinks it's amorphous. Yeah, it doesn't include Trump or whatever.
Who's a game show host, which he's not. He was the president, dude. Like, we don't get to call Obama the state senator from Illinois.
Even if even if like his like amorphous notion of who the establishment is at any time, and he deploys it where it's effective for him. And I'm not just saying this isn't just about Jimmy, and make that clear. Like, I don't care about him as a person. Again, this is a line of argument that we hear online, although maybe increasingly less. I'm not sure, but the fact is that just empirically speaking, it's not true. Our election numbers, the people who have been voting in elections, they're not necessarily voting the way I want them to vote, but the numbers are going up. They're not going down.
Yeah.
You're seeing more voter participation across the board than, if you look at the past, I don't know, 2020, 2018, 2022, not as record breaking as the other ones. But I mean, just even from an empirical standpoint, what he's saying is all just sort of, there's nothing in this video that is even accidentally true.
Mm-hmm.
And people should just
spray with pepper spray. I mean, people were sprayed with pepper spray and almost killed. And I think he doesn't care at this point, or he has convinced himself. Well, he's not. I don't think he's.
But I don't, I'm just saying, like, putting aside him, which whatever.
We should. But I know what you're saying, though. It doesn't matter because he's influential.
This set of lies drives a certain segment of the population, and basically disempowers people at the end of the day, in the same way that Alex Jones's conspiracies disempower people, because it basically says, like, look, if Ray Epps can sue Fox for defamation because he is a deep state psyop, and they have the ability to completely upend the entire civil procedure system, and they're not worried that this psyop government agent is going to get caught in the course of a civil suit where Fox News spends millions, probably tens of millions, on lawyers. If that can't protect you, then there's no point in any of it. That's what the ultimate danger of this stuff is. It is completely disempowering while pretending that you're empowered because you have secret knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what's going on here. It's the same stuff that Alex Jones did.
It is.
That is the, whatever, we can make fun of his comedy because it's bad and whatnot, but that's the agenda. And it's the agenda that people should focus on and understand what's going on, because this is ultimately incredibly disempowering in the guise of empowering you because you have secret knowledge now.
And that's Russell Brand too. That's Russell Brand's whole shtick.
And that's why they've got to say there's something censorious going on. The authoritarians are keeping you from hearing the truth. There's nothing you haven't heard.
No, and it makes people feel at least like they're in some way superior, as opposed to having to make those.
They have the secret knowledge.
Those choices. Well, that's what conspiracy theories do. But then from a political perspective, it's like I found, and I still find, some of what Dorr pushes and propagates. I mean, now he's basically kind of MAGA, but even before that, like this notion that voting for somebody is an individual expression of your soul, and it's like some artistic choice, right? That's why you should don't vote against your conscience because Hillary Clinton's X, Y, blah, 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 as opposed to a strategic choice in a bevy of other political choices that you can make where you can be more pure or organized with DSA or whatever. I found that to be one of the most insidious things he promoted. But it all, that's disempowering in general, all of that together.
I mean, there's nobody, in my opinion, and he can sue me for this. I don't think there's anything more sleazy than these people. Alex Jones, these are people who literally, and Jimmy, and Carolla, and Joe Rogan, they literally don't care if people live or die. They don't care.
Yeah.
Rafi,
they don't care because
on the IM also brought up another lie in that video. They can't beat a game show host. January 6th happened 3 months after they had just beaten the game show host.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the president, but they had beaten him. It wasn't.
No, clearly the election was rigged.
That may be part of the conspiracies selling. I mean,
it turned out that him constantly only basically bashing Democrats on his program was like the only stuff that got him views, and he just realized.
It's exactly right, Emma. That's exactly where he's. But not. And here's the thing: not even the conscience, and not just him. Not even the conscience. No conscience. There is absolutely no conscience. And one thing I find is almost disturbing. Jimmy Dore once, when I told him I was unfollowing him, he goes, "Hey, yeah," he DM'd me. He goes, "Hey, you're ratio. This is ratioed, man. See, in the green room, and we're all." He started throwing. I don't still to this point know what they mean by ratioed, and I don't care. But they're all of his fans are going, "Kindler's getting ratioed. This guy's getting ratioed." It's like he's a crazed, greedy grifter who found his gold rush.
Well said.
Andy Kindler.
Ooh.
This is why we bring you on.
I close strong.
Yeah.
I like
You
closing
did.
strong.
You're out of frame. You are out of frame.
I love you guys so much.
Andy, take care of yourself.
I'm
enjoy the
staying out
picket
of frame.
line. We'll see you in the picket lines.
Okay, I will be there, but not today, but Monday. I'm going
All right,
down.
beautiful.
So please get the call entertainment tonight.
I can't believe they're letting them
Will
on
do.
the picket lines. They'll probably put you in the back. They'll probably put you in the back. All right, Andy Kindler, ladies and gentlemen.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and